I never imagined my marriage would lead me to this precipice, a moment so charged with both exhilaration and uncertainty that it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind whispering promises of freedom and danger. David Bennett, my husband of 7 years, kissed my shoulder softly, his lips warm against my skin, then stepped aside. He had had his moment, a fleeting connection that anchored us, and now he was letting me, Laura Bennett, step into the unknown to experience what would unfold next. The room was silent, the air thick with anticipation, but I felt a shift around me, a subtle current that told me they were ready. David leaned in once more, his voice low and steady, a quiet command wrapped in tenderness. "Enjoy," he whispered. Our marriage hadn't always been this complex, this layered with unspoken desires and bold leaps. 10 years ago, when we met in a crowded Chicago cafe, I was a freelance photographer, chasing fleeting moments through my lens. Weddings, corporate events, the occasional art project that fed my soul. David was a software engineer, grounded and dependable, with a dry wit that made me laugh until my sides ache. We were opposites in so many ways. Me, impulsive and creative, him methodical and steady, but that contrast drew us together. A perfect balance. We fell in love over late-night talks and shared dreams, building a life in our cozy apartment in Logan Square. Its mismatched furniture and creaky floors, a testament to our early years of scraping by. Those first years were electric. We'd stay up until dawn planning our future. A house in the suburbs, maybe a dog, a photography studio for me, a start-up for David. But life has a way of dulling even the brightest sparks. My photography business slowed as clients dwindled, the rise of smartphone cameras and budget photographers cutting into my income. David's job at a tech startup demanded long hours, leaving him drained and distant. Bills piled up. Our savings dwindled, and the weight of routine settled over us like a fog. We still loved each other fiercely, but the passion that had once defined us was buried under stress, exhaustion, and unspoken frustrations. It wasn't that David wasn't enough. He was everything. Attentive kind. Devoted, the kind of man who remembered my favourite coffee order and left notes on the fridge when he worked late. But within me there was a hunger, a restless need for more that I couldn't articulate. It wasn't about love or loyalty. It was about a part of me that craved intensity, exploration, a release from the boundaries of our everyday life. I had tried to suppress it, throwing myself into editing photos or picking up new hobbies like pottery and yoga. But the longing lingered, a quiet ache that surfaced in the stillness of our nights together. I'd lie awake beside him, his steady breathing a comfort. Yet my mind would wander to fantasies I couldn't voice, desires I wasn't sure he'd understand. That evening, as the Chicago skyline glowed faintly through our window, David held nothing back. His body pressed close, moving deeply into the rhythm we had perfected over years of intimacy. His breath caught with every motion, the sheets twisting beneath us, damp and clinging to our skin. My legs tightened around him. I didn't want to let him go, didn't want to lose the connection that tethered us. He kissed me slowly, intensely, as if pouring his entire being into that moment, as if he could sense the hunger beneath my surface. His hands stayed firm at my waist, gripping as though I might slip away if he didn't hold tightly enough. The tension built his focus, his effort, the way he gave everything he had, the way he... When it ended, he collapsed beside me, his chest rising rapidly, his skin flushed and damp, a faint sheen of sweat catching the lamplight. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows dancing across the cracked plaster, still catching my breath. My body ached in all the right ways. Yet deep down something was still stirring, still burning a fire that refused to be quenched. I turned to him, my voice barely a whisper, raw with need. Again, his eyes opened slowly, and he smiled, soft and tired, his hand reaching to brush a strand of hair from my face. "Give me a second," he said, his voice warm with affection, a hint of amusement in his tone. He tried. He really did. He kissed my shoulder, his lips lingering as if to reassure me, then dragged his fingertips down my spine, each touch igniting a shiver. He rolled over, climbing back into the space between us. His movement slower this time, more deliberate, his lips pressed into my neck soft and tender, and I welcomed him again, matching his rhythm, urging him on with my body, my hands tracing the familiar planes of his back. But I could feel it, the hesitation in his pace, the way his breath began to falter, his strength slipping as his muscles fought to keep up. Still, I held him close, kissing his cheek, his jaw, his mouth, pouring my love into every touch. "It's okay," I whispered, my voice steady, reassuring. He looked at me, his eyes holding both apology and effort, a vulnerability that made my heart ache. But I wasn't disappointed. I loved him, and he was trying, giving me everything he had. He was still with me, warm and close. His presence, a steady anchor in the storm of my desires. But within me something else remained. Not doubt, not emptiness, just hunger, not because he had done anything wrong, but because I was never satisfied, never fully sated by the boundaries of what we had, no matter how much I loved him. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen nursing my second cup of coffee, the bitter warmth grounding me. I was still wrapped in David's t-shirt from the night before, the fabric soft and worn, carrying his scent. The apartment was quiet, the early sunlight filtering through the blinds, casting golden stripes across the counter. David walked in, his hair a mess, eyes half awake, but there was a focused intensity in his expression. Something unresolved, as if he'd been turning a thought over in his mind all night. He leaned on the counter, watching me for a moment too long, his gaze searching before speaking. "Do you ever feel like I'm not enough?" The question landed softly, not defensive or insecure, just open and curious, as if he were inviting me to bare my soul. I met his eyes, my heart tightening at the vulnerability in his voice. "No, never," I said, my voice steady, honest, wanting him to know he was my foundation. He nodded slowly, his gaze searching mine, as if he could see the truth beneath my words. "But you're still hungry, after I can feel it, see it?" I didn't answer right away, just held the warm rim of the mug between my hands, the heat anchoring me as my thoughts swirled. "It's not about you," I said, eventually choosing my words with care, wanting to protect him while being honest. "You give me everything, I feel that, and I love that. It's just, there's something more. I need something I can't explain." He stepped closer, his presence warm and familiar, his hand resting lightly on the counter beside me. But it's still not enough. I looked at him, really looked, seeing the man who had stood by me through every high and low. There was no shame in his voice, just truth, and perhaps something deeper, a willingness to explore, to push boundaries for me to meet me where I was. I took a breath, my voice soft but unflinching. I don't want more because you're lacking. I want more because I just do. It's who I am. He nodded again, thoughtful, his eyes never leaving mine. A quiet resolve settling over him, and if there was a way to give you that without losing what we have, would you take it? I didn't move, didn't answer, but I didn't look away. My silence was enough, a tacit agreement that spoke louder than words. He reached across the counter and took my hand, his fingers curling gently around mine, warm and steady. Though he didn't say it, I felt it. He was already planning how to make it happen, how to give me what I craved, without letting it fracture the life we'd built together. 2 days later, David came home from work with 5 men I had never met. No warning, no explanation, just the soft creak of the door and the sound of footsteps in the hallway. They walked in behind him, as if they belonged in our apartment, smiling politely, nodding as they slipped off their shoes, their coats already half unbuttoned. I stood in the kitchen still holding a half-chopped onion, the sharp scent stinging my eyes. My hands frozen mid-motion. "Dinner's not ready yet," I said, my voice uncertain, a nervous laugh escaping me as I tried to make sense of the surreal scene unfolding before me. "That's okay," David replied, setting his keys down on the counter with a soft clink, his tone calm but weighted with intent. "They're not here for dinner." The 5 men sat around our dining table casually, as if they had done this 100 times before, their presence filling the small space with an unspoken energy. They didn't talk much, just small comments about work traffic or a headline on the news, but I felt their eyes on me, a quiet intensity in their gazes. Not rude, not bold, just watchful, as if they were waiting for a signal, a moment to begin. My heart raced, a mix of confusion, curiosity, and a strange thrill swirling in my chest. Who were these men? Why were they here? And why did David seem so calm, so certain? David opened a bottle of wine, poured a glass and brought it to me, his movements deliberate, his eyes never leaving mine. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft, searching for any sign of hesitation, any reason to stop. I nodded, though the gesture came a moment late, my fingers tightening around the glass, the cool surface grounding me. He touched my waist gently, holding me there for a second, his thumb brushing against my hip, in a familiar, reassuring gesture. Then he leaned in and whispered, "They're here for you." The words hung in the air, heavy and surreal, sending a jolt through me that was equal parts shock and anticipation. Before I could react, he stepped closer and kissed me, not a soft, hesitant kiss, but one full and anchored, as if he needed me to feel him, to trust him before anything else could happen. His lips were warm, urgent, a reminder of the love that tethered us even in this uncharted territory. The 5 men didn't speak. They sat across the room, spread out along the far wall, past the open kitchen, the low light catching their faces, curious, focused, unreadable. Their eyes never left me, their presence, a quiet weight that filled the space, amplifying every sound, every breath. David's hands moved slowly, deliberately, as if he were savouring every moment. One slipped beneath the edge of my shirt, the other settled at my waist, his touch both familiar and electric. He lifted the fabric over my head with practised ease, the cool air brushing against my skin, raising goosebumps. Then, with quiet certainty, he reached behind me and released the clasp of my bra with a subtle flick, the fabric falling away. His lips brushed along my collarbone, his breath warm and steady, a silent promise that he was here, that this was for us. I didn't resist. He guided me backward toward the counter, every movement deliberate, unhurried, grounded, as if he wanted this moment to be seen, to be felt by everyone in the room. In one slow motion, he eased my remaining layers away, piece by piece, until the softness of fabric was no longer between us. The cool marble of the countertop met my skin, sending a ripple through me, grounding me in the intensity of the moment. David stepped back slightly, just enough to take in the sight of me, his eyes dark with a mix of love and desire. Then he leaned in again, his hands sliding along my thighs, his mouth following the same path, unhurried and steady. When his lips pressed into me with intent, I exhaled a slow, staggered breath that had been waiting to escape my body, responding instinctively to his touch. He stayed focused, his pace calm and thoughtful, as if every touch was a vow, a declaration of his commitment to me. He wasn't rushing, wasn't performing for anyone else. There was something honest in the way he moved, as if he was speaking through his presence alone, telling me he was here, that this was for me, for us. I braced myself, my hands finding the edge of the counter behind me, my fingers curling against the smooth surface as a slow warmth gathered layer by layer. Each moment pulled me deeper into a stillness I hadn't known I craved, a space where I was both vulnerable and powerful. I wasn't being held. I was being witnessed, seen in a way that felt both intimate and exposed. Across the room no one moved, but I could feel their eyes, their presence hanging in the air, impossible to ignore. David remained close, fully immersed, never breaking rhythm. His steady movements, building something quiet but undeniable, a connection that transcended the physical. Without thinking, my body rose slightly toward him, as if drawn by a shift in gravity, seeking more, needing more. When he finally pulled back, he rose slowly, his lips brushing my stomach, then my chest, then the hollow just beneath my jaw, each touch a lingering farewell. He helped me turn gently, guiding me to rest against the countertop, my body following his lead, with a trust born of years, together. My arms settled, my back shifted into a subtle arch, my breath steady but shallow, my pulse racing. That's when I saw them. The 5 men no longer still. They adjusted in their seats, jackets, unfastened postures, shifting their movements subtle, but purposeful, as if they were preparing for what came next. There was no rush, no need for words. The energy in the room had changed, focused, intentional, and quiet in its weight. A silent agreement that something was about to begin. David moved behind me, his hands returning to my hips, grounding me in his familiar touch, his fingers warm against my skin. He leaned in, his pace deliberate, his breath warming my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. I felt the strength in his hold, the way he moved in close, steady and sure, his body aligning with mine. The tension between us came to life, a current that pulsed with every motion, a silent conversation between us. I moved with him, matched his rhythm. Let the pressure build slowly, each moment, deepening our connection. I felt his focus, his presence, as if he wanted to leave no part of this unspoken. I was his, and he wanted them to see that, even now, as we stood on the brink of something new, and I let them surrendering to the moment to him. A soft sound escaped him low, and waited a sign of his own intensity. his own investment in this act of trust. Then he slowed, his forehead resting against my shoulder, his breathing still deep, heavy with emotion. His hand slipped from my waist with care, trailing down my sides, a gentle farewell that carried the weight of his love. He stayed close a moment longer, his warmth lingering, then stepped back, his presence still palpable, even as he moved away. I remained where I was, still grounded, my body buzzing beneath the surface, alive with anticipation, my heart pounding in my chest. Across from me the 5 men stood one by one, with no chaos or urgency, just motion with purpose, jackets eased off, shoulders, sleeves rolled back, hands, adjusted buttons, their movements calm but deliberate. David leaned in once more, his lips brushing the shell of my ear, his voice barely audible. A final reassurance. Enjoy. The first man stepped forward without a word, his presence calm but commanding, his eyes meeting mine. For a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement. His hands settled at my waist, warm and steady, and I didn't resist. He moved in close, confident and deliberate. His touch, both unfamiliar and electrifying, sending a rush of warmth through me. My body reacted. Before my mind caught up a primal response to his proximity, I drew in a breath, rising to meet him, overwhelmed by the closeness and intensity of his pace. He moved with control, measured and precise, each motion calculated to draw me deeper into the moment, my hands pressed against the counter, my arms trembling as I tried to stay grounded, to anchor myself against the tide of sensation. Every shift sent a ripple through me, tightening something deep inside, a coil of tension that grew with each breath. Then it overtook me. Sudden, breathless, my body tensed, then softened as a sound escaped me without warning. Raw and unguarded, I didn't collapse. I opened, surrendering to the release. And just like that, he stepped back, his presence lingering as the sensation passed, leaving me trembling but alive. Before I could fully recover, another approached, taller, broader, his frame imposing, yet gentle his movements, careful but assured. He adjusted me gently, his hands firm but considerate, repositioning me with a tenderness that surprised me. Then he leaned in, his breath warm against my skin. I gripped the counter's edge again, my knees faltering under the pressure, my body still humming from the first encounter. His pace was different, slower, deeper, more deliberate, each motion carrying a weight that anchored me in the moment. My breath hitched, my body held in place by his steady presence. His touch, a grounding force. The second wave came sharper, more intense, a crest that broke over me with a force I hadn't anticipated. My thighs shook, my hands tightened, and I reached for something I couldn't name, a fleeting sense of transcendence. Then I let go, breathless and undone, the release washing over me like a tide, leaving me gasping. But it didn't end there. The third moved in next, his touch lighter, more exploratory, his fingers brushing my skin with a curiosity that felt almost reverent. One hand reached up, curling gently into my hair, tilting my head just enough so he could meet my eyes. His gaze was intense, searching as if he wanted to understand me in this moment, to see the woman beneath the surface. He didn't wait, his movements firm and assured, a quiet confidence in every touch. My breath caught in short bursts, my body jolting with each rise of pressure, each shift pulling me deeper into the experience. But I didn't pull away. I leaned into it fully, not because I had to, but because I needed to, because this was the release I had been chasing. The sensation overtook me again, louder, more intense. a wave that crashed through me with a force that left me trembling. A sound tore from my chest, raw and unfiltered as the pressure unravelled, everything leaving me exposed and alive. He steadied me as I shook in his hold, his touch keeping me grounded while the moment passed, his presence, a quiet anchor. They weren't done. The fourth stepped in, and this time another stood in front of me, their movements coordinated, seamless. The one in front lifted my chin with care, his eyes locking onto mine, a silent question in his gaze. Then he kissed me deeply, slowly, his lips warm and deliberate, drawing me into a moment of intimacy that felt almost private, despite the others around us. He lowered himself into position, his movements precise, purposeful. I welcomed him fully, my body responding instinctively, opening to him. The one behind me found his pace, his touch steady and intentional, his hands guiding me with a quiet authority, their movements aligned in perfect sync, one anchoring me with calm control, the other responding to the rhythm I gave him, creating a harmony that enveloped me. The pressure mounted fast, unbearable in its intensity, a crescendo that built with every breath. When it crested, I let go. The sound, low and muffled, caught between them as they stepped back, their warmth lingering like an echo. The fifth moved into place, his presence quieter, more reserved, but no less intense. His eyes holding a depth that made me pause. My body was already trembling, overwhelmed, unsteady. But I reached for him, matched his rhythm, let the moment stretch, savouring the connection. Then, without warning, I felt another presence behind him, not replacing, but supporting, enhancing a collective effort that felt both overwhelming and grounding. One steadied my hips, another guided my legs apart, a third stayed near his touch, light grounding me with a gentleness that contrasted the intensity. They worked together not as a blur, but as a single current moving through me, a unified force that held me in its embrace. I wasn't lost. I was held surrounded by something steady and certain, a moment of pure connection. My breath faltered. My hands slipped. My voice broke as the rhythm between them found its peak, a crescendo that felt infinite. There was no urgency. They moved with absolute control, and I gave myself to it without resistance, surrendering fully to the experience. One of them reached just where I needed, setting off a reaction I couldn't contain. A spark that ignited everything. It didn't rise gradually. It struck all at once, a final release that hit like lightning. My back arched, mouth parted, but no sound followed the force of it. Too overwhelming for words. The sensation rippled through every inch of me, a tidal wave that left me trembling complete. My limbs gave out. My body melted into the warmth that held me, their hands steadying me as I surrendered. I wasn't falling. I was being carried, cradled in the aftermath of something transcendent. Eventually, everything stilled. The tension lifted. Their hands eased away, gentle and careful, leaving me in a quiet, sacred space. The room settled back to silence. The only sound my uneven breath. My skin-flushed muscles soft and pliant. Everything inside me was humming open, full, and finally quiet. A stillness I hadn't known I could reach. Then I looked up. David was still there across the room, unmoving, watching. His eyes were locked on mine. His jaw tight. His hands clenched. Not in anger, but in awe. A reverence that took my breath away. His gaze held pride, love, and something deeper, a recognition of the woman I was, the woman he had given this moment to. And me. I wasn't reaching any more. I was complete whole in a way I hadn't thought possible. The days that followed were a delicate dance, a careful navigation of the new terrain our marriage had entered. David and I didn't speak about that night immediately, as if we both needed time to process its weight to understand what it meant for us. I went through the motions of my daily life, editing photos in my cramped home office, meeting clients at the gallery, sipping coffee at the corner cafe, but my mind kept drifting back to the intensity of that evening, the way it had shifted something fundamental within me. I wasn't ashamed, but I was cautious, aware that we had crossed a threshold that could change everything. One evening, as we sat on the couch, the TV humming with a mindless sitcom, David broke the silence. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, his hand resting on my knee, his thumb tracing small circles. I nodded, turning to face him, searching his eyes for any sign of regret. "Are you?" He exhaled a small smile tugging at his lips, a flicker of relief in his expression. "I think so." It was intense, more than I expected. But seeing you like that, so alive, so free, it was worth it. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently, my heart swelling with gratitude. "It didn't feel like I was losing you," I said, my voice steady, honest. "It felt like you were giving me something, like you were part of it, even from across the room." He nodded, his eyes softening, a quiet understanding passing between us. I am. But I need to know, did it give you what you needed? I thought about it, really thought about it, letting the questions settle into my bones. That night had been a release, a fulfillment of a hunger I hadn't fully understood, a chance to explore a part of myself I had kept hidden. But it wasn't just about the physical. It was about trust, about David's willingness to step outside the boundaries of our marriage to give me something I craved, to stand by me as I explored. "It did," I said, finally, my voice firm, "but only because it was with you, because you made it happen, because you trusted me." He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me, his warmth enveloping me. For the first time in months, I felt truly at peace, as if we had faced the unknown together and emerged stronger, more connected. We didn't need to dissect it further. We had ventured into uncharted territory and come out whole. But life, as always, complicates things. A week later, I ran into my friend Sarah at the cafe, our usual spot, with its worn wooden tables and the faint hum of indie music. Sarah was a fellow photographer, blunt and perceptive, with a knack for seeing through my carefully curated exterior. As we sipped our lattes, she tilted her head, studying me with a knowing smile. "You're different," she said, her voice curious, teasing. "What's going on?" I laughed, trying to brush it off my fingers, fidgeting with the handle of my cup. "Just busy with work, you know. The gallery contract's keeping me on my toes." She raised an eyebrow, unconvinced, her grin widening. "No, it's more than that. You're glowing, but also, I don't know, unsettled, like you're carrying a secret. Spill?" I hesitated, my fingers tracing the rim of my cup, the ceramic cool against my skin. Sarah was open-minded, adventurous in her own life. But how do you explain something like that night, without sounding reckless, without risking judgment. David and I, we tried something new, I said, vaguely testing the waters. It was intense, but it brought us closer. Her eyes widened, a spark of intrigue lighting up her face. Oh, you have to tell me more. What kind of new are we talking about? Don't leave me hanging. I shook my head, smiling despite myself. A flush creeping up my neck. Let's just say we explored some boundaries and came out okay. Better than okay, actually. Sarah leaned back, her expression a mix of amusement and admiration, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. Good for you. Most couples wouldn't dare go there, whatever there is. Just be careful, okay? That kind of thing can stir up more than you expect, good and bad. Her words stayed with me, a quiet warning that echoed in the back of my mind. That night, as David and I lay in bed, the city's hum filtering through the open window, I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper. Do you think we'll do it again? He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm, his touch soothing. Do you want to? He asked, his tone neutral, leaving the door open for me to decide. I didn't know. Part of me craved the intensity, the rush of that night, the way it had made me feel alive, seen whole. But another part wondered if it was a Pandora's box we shouldn't reopen, a risk that could unravel the delicate balance we'd found. Maybe, I said, my voice tentative. But only if we're both sure I don't want to lose what we have. He kissed my forehead, his lips lingering, his touch a quiet promise. We won't, whatever happens. We do it together always. Over the next few months, we settled into a new rhythm, a renewed sense of connection that felt both familiar and fresh. My photography business picked up the gallery contract, leading to more opportunities, including a solo exhibition that reignited my passion for capturing the world through my lens. David's startup hit a major milestone, securing funding that eased the financial strain that had weighed on us for years. We talked more, laughed, more rediscovered the spark that had drawn us together all those years ago in that crowded cafe. But the memory of that night never fully faded. It was a secret we carried, a moment that had tested and strengthened us. A touchstone we returned to in quiet moments. Occasionally I'd catch David looking at me with that same awe from that evening, his eyes tracing the lines of my face as if seeing me anew. And I'd feel a rush of gratitude for a partner who saw me, all of me, and loved me enough to let me explore, to let me be. One evening, as we walked home from dinner, the Chicago skyline glittering against the night sky, David took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful, a hint of a smile in his tone. I never thought I'd be okay with something like that. But seeing you so alive, so completely yourself, it changed how I see us. It made me love you more, if that's possible. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. The city's energy pulsing around us. It changed me too. I said, my voice soft but certain, but only because it was with you, because you were there, because you trusted me. He stopped walking, pulling me close, his arms wrapping around me as the cool night air brushed against my skin. I always will, he said, his voice low, a vow that settled into my bones. We didn't need to say more. That night had been a leap into the unknown, a test of trust and love that could have broken us, but instead made us stronger. It wasn't about satisfying every hunger or erasing every doubt. It was about facing them together, about choosing each other, even in the face of the unconventional. As we walked on the city humming around us, I felt complete. Not because every desire was fulfilled, but because I had a partner who saw me, held me, and let me be, no matter where our journey took us. But life, as always, has a way of challenging even the strongest bonds. A few months later, David's sister Emily came to visit her arrival, a welcome disruption to our routine. Emily was a therapist, sharp and empathetic, with a knack for asking questions that cut straight to the heart. Over dinner at our favourite Italian restaurant, her eyes flicked between us, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "You two seem different," she said, twirling her wine glass. "Happier, maybe. What's the secret?" David and I exchanged a glance. A silent conversation passing between us. "Just working on us," he said smoothly, his hand resting on mine under the table. Emily raised an eyebrow, her smile widening. "Uh-huh. Well, whatever it is, it's working. You're practically glowing, Laura." I laughed, deflecting, but her words lingered. A reminder of how that night had changed us, how it had left its mark. Later, as we washed dishes side by side, David nudged me with his elbow. "Think we should tell her?" He teased, his eyes glinting with mischief. I swatted him with a dish towel, laughing. "Not a chance. She'd have us on her couch analysing it for hours." He grinned, pulling me into his arms, the warmth of his embrace. A quiet reassurance. "Probably. But I like that it's our secret, just you and me." "Me too," I said, resting my head against his chest, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat grounding me. As the months turned into a year, we continued to grow, both together and individually. I started teaching photography workshops at the gallery, sharing my passion with others, finding a new sense of purpose. David took on a leadership role at his startup, his confidence and drive a reminder of the man I'd fallen in love with. We travelled more, taking weekend trips to the coast, rediscovering the joy of spontaneity of being us. But the question of whether we'd revisit that night lingered, a quiet undercurrent in our conversations. One evening, as we sat on our balcony, the city sprawling beneath us, I brought it up. "Do you ever think about it?" I asked, my voice soft, the wine in my glass catching the light. David leaned back, his gaze distant, thoughtful. "Sometimes, not because I need it, but because I saw how much it meant to you. How it unlocked something." I nodded, my fingers tracing the rim of my glass. "It did, but I don't know if I need it again. Not now. Maybe not ever. What we have, it's enough." He reached for my hand, his touch warm, steady. "If you ever do, we'll talk about it together." I smiled, a weight lifting from my chest. Together. That night, as we lay in bed, the city's hum a soft lullaby, I realized that our journey wasn't about chasing every desire or erasing every doubt. It was about trust, about choosing each other, about building a life that could hold both the ordinary and the extraordinary. We had faced the unknown, tested our limits, and come out stronger. Not because we were perfect, but because we were honest, willing to see each other fully, flaws and all. As I drifted to sleep, David's arm around me, I felt a profound sense of peace. I was Laura Bennett. a woman who had dared to explore, to hunger, to love fiercely. And with David by my side I was whole, not because every need was met, but because we faced them together, unafraid, unyielding forever,